Today is the first Sunday in the season called Advent, and Advent is traditionally a time of preparation leading up to Christmas, and it's a very familiar sort of a season. It's often a very busy sort of a season. Advent is sociable. There's parties and there's dinners going on. It's bright. There's lights lit up all around the city. It's busy. It's busy with shopping. It's busy with wrapping gifts. It's noisy with family and with friends. It's celebratory with lots of church services and special things that are going on. And I guess if you're a student, or possibly even if you're working, it's stressful with deadlines looming. All of these things are the sort of familiar feelings of the Advent season. Not all of these feelings or experiences come from a focus on God, but they're the reality for this time of year. But not this year. This year is going to be a very different sort of Advent. Parties are most definitely out, unless you're partying with your housemates or your family, but you might be really fed up with them and not want to party with them at all. Dinners can't happen at the moment, and even once restrictions get lifted in a couple of weeks' time, dinners will still be much smaller. There are lights, but we're not really out and about too much to see those lights. And shopping isn't so much a busy activity as an online activity at 3 a.m. in your pyjamas, or, maybe that's just me. Church is online. And if we're really honest, we're going to miss the fellowship of singing Christmas songs together. We're going to miss our secret gift exchange thing. Oh, who's got who's buying gifts for who? We're going to miss Christmas jumpers. Some people are going to miss Christmas jumpers. I might not miss the pressure of Christmas jumpers. We may do something with Christmas jumpers. We'll see how Advent kind of unfolds. And I guess if you're a student, well, the deadlines and the pressure, that's still the same whether it's lockdown or not, so that hasn't changed. December, when it comes this week, is looking pretty dark. But that's not the whole story. In fact, it's not even the most important part of the story. Christmas may be looking pretty different this year, but the reality of what we're celebrating remains exactly the same. The reality of Jesus' birth breaks through the darkness with light. And each week, for the next 4 weeks, we are going to celebrate that light. And to celebrate what light can mean in this particular 2020 Advent and Christmas season, we're going to be thinking about life, we're going to be thinking about peace and joy and hope. And we're going to do that by using this virtual Advent wreath. We can't all be together to light candles in person, but we can hear God's word, and we can reflect on the light even as the candles are lit, ending on Christmas Day with the Christ candle right in the middle of the Advent wreath, telling us that Jesus, the light of the world, has come. And today we're thinking about light and life. There's something about light, I think, which I guess recognises the presence of life. You see a darkened window and it seems like no one's home. But when you see a window that's lit up, where there's a light shining out, it says someone's home, and there's a kind of warmth about it. It feels welcoming. Or when you're walking along a dark path and you put on your phone and some light shines and shines on your steps, you become more confident. You become more sure of your steps and more sure of where you're going. It feels safer. The presence of light changes our perception of what's going on around about us. And I think that's really important for us to recognise now. Christmas Advent 2020. The presence of light shines something different into the reality of what's going on. Doesn't necessarily change the realities of lockdown, the stresses that we're feeling, the difficulties that we're feeling. But light shines something new into those things. One of the things I love about the Christmas season is songs. So I have a no Christmas songs before the 1st of December rule. Rules are kind of there for bending, but generally I have a no Christmas songs before 1st of December rule, and so far I've managed to keep it. But you know, I would happily listen to Christmas songs all year round. And I don't mean the kind of cheesy pop Christmas songs that are playing in shops constantly. That's a really nice break for this year. One of the blessings of 2020 is no cheesy pop Christmas songs. What I mean is the kind of songs that I would love to listen to and could listen to all year round are the ones that really deeply and richly speak about the realities of Christmas, of God with us, of God, one of us. And one of these songs is Hark the Herald Angels Sing. Now, we're a wee bit early thinking about angel choirs today. We're going to be thinking about angel choirs in a couple of weeks' time. But the lyrics of Hark the Herald Angel speak right into our theme for today, our theme of light and life. Because the last verse of Hark the Herald says, "Hail the heaven-born Prince of Peace, hail the Son of Righteousness, light and life to all he brings, risen with healing in his wings. Mild he lays his glory by, born that man no more may die, born to raise the sons of earth, born to give them second birth. Light and life to all he brings, born that man no more may die." Light and life go together. Light is a life-giving thing. And that light is found in Jesus. And the place where we most clearly find this description of the life-giving light of Jesus is the beginning of the Gospel of John. Beautiful words of life.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth.
The beginning of John's Gospel is one of the best known parts of the Bible. It is beautiful language, beautiful imagery. It tells us the reality of Christmas without the shepherds, without the stable, without the angels, without all the things which kind of make for Christmas pictures and Christmas cards and Christmas decorations. It tells us about who Jesus is and why he came, and it's full of light and it's full of life, something which is so much needed, particularly at this time in 2020. Beginning of John is deep stuff, like really deep stuff. It gets to the heart of who God is and gets to the heart of why Jesus came. It gets to the heart even of who we are as people. And we could spend weeks and weeks just thinking about some of the different concepts that you find in the first 14, 18, something like that, verses of John's Gospel. But instead, we're going to think about it for 20 minutes and then move on to something else next week. I want us to just touch on 3 things that we find in this passage which tell us something about life. And I think which in this passage shows us something of the connection between life and light. And the first thing I think is that life is about creation. Life is created. John's Gospel starts with the exact same words as we find at the very beginning of the whole Bible. In the beginning. In the beginning God created. This is Genesis. And in the beginning was the Word, says John. Not just though in the beginning was the Word. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And as John's Gospel goes on and as it unfolds, we see that John equates this term word, this Greek word logos, with Jesus. Right at the start of his Gospel, John is telling us something about the nature of God. The one called the Word is God himself. And in the beginning God created, says Genesis, and in the beginning the Word who was with God and who was God created. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. The Word who is God and who is with God is creative, is creator. Nothing was made without his action. God is creative and God creates life. And what's the first thing that God creates? It's light. So Genesis 1 tells us, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. Light is the start of life. Not people, not animals, not fish, but light is the first thing which is created by God. Light is life, and it overcomes the chaos of darkness. Creation is to do with life, ongoing and growing life. God hasn't created something impersonal. He hasn't created something static. Creation has a heartbeat. It's all about life. Life for the world and life for the people in it. And so John can say about Jesus, in him was life. And that life was the light of all mankind. John isn't talking about existing. John isn't talking about breathing in and out or having a heartbeat. He is talking about what it means to be a person, to really live as the people God created us to be. And this life, real life, only comes in Jesus. In fact, later in John's Gospel, as we heard over the summer, Jesus says that one of the reasons why he came is to bring life, and life in all its fullness. He says that in John 10:10. He doesn't just create life though. He doesn't just give life. He actually lives life with his people. The Word became flesh and made its dwelling among us. This is verse 14. The one who created took on the reality of our life and lived among us. He knew our hopes. He knew our fears. He knew our joys. He knew our struggles. He knew every part of human life. He even knew our darkness. And yet he still made his dwelling among us. In the Message version of this verse 14, it says, "The Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighbourhood." Light is here. Light is present with us. We can't talk about Jesus as some kind of abstract or distant deity, because he's not. As John puts it, the Word is made flesh and blood and moved into our neighbourhood. He didn't come to a palace. He didn't come behind big walls away from ordinary people like us. He came and moved into your neighbourhood and my neighbourhood. He didn't reveal his glory from a distance. He is right in the middle of the life of the world. And to say that Jesus is the Word made flesh and blood and moved into the neighbourhood is to say that God walks among us, became one of us, inhabited our life, our world, our neighbourhood. The second thing I think the light of Jesus can shine into our lives is clarity. One of the big questions I think that this year has brought up, and particularly as we come towards the end of the year and look back, is what's life all about? When things get dark, as they have this year, what brings light? What brings clarity? And John is very clear, because he says, in him, in Jesus, was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The life that Jesus carries with him illuminates or lights up our own lives. The life that Jesus brings gives clarity to our lives, because in Jesus we can see what being human is all about. In Jesus we see God, but in Jesus we also see ourselves. In Jesus we see a man so deeply connected to God the Father, someone who knows the importance of that relationship for every part of life. In Jesus we see a man who radically loves people, radically loves them. We see a man who wasn't afraid to turn things upside down and to cause a fuss. We see a man who wasn't afraid to challenge the normal ways of doing things. The new normal is worth working for if it's the normal that Jesus brings about. In Jesus, we see a man who calls people to God because he knows that it's only in God that we find real life. And so John goes on, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. To talk about Jesus as light, and that light as life, is also to admit the presence of darkness. John's Gospel is very, very real about this. The whole Bible is very real about this. And yet, no matter the depth of the darkness, light still breaks through. Light will always overcome darkness. People try all sorts of things to deal with the darkness. There's the negative stuff, like alcohol or drugs, which potentially leads to a kind of a negative dependency and even addiction. Then there's also the kind of seemingly positive things which people try. There's self-help, or inward focused meditation, or endless fitness, all of the things that try to become barriers and block out the darkness. But it's still there. It's just hidden behind the barriers. It's not dealt with. Light transforms darkness. It doesn't hide it, it gets rid of it. And John tells us the true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. Real light, real clarity comes into our lives from Jesus alone. And when you can say this, you can say with the writer of the Gospel, with John, we have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. And as we come to know Jesus, as we experience who he is, it's not just a case of saying, oh yeah, he makes me feel good, or he makes my life better. That just is a barrier to the darkness. What we should be saying is, we have seen his glory. We've got a glimpse of eternity, eternity in light. And we see his glory and we recognise that he comes and speaks grace and truth to us. That's the kind of clarity which Jesus gives to our lives. And towards the end of his gospel, towards the end of his life, Jesus came to Jerusalem and faced the challenge of the Jewish leaders. And Jesus told them, you're going to have the light just a little while longer. This is just a matter of days before his crucifixion. You're going to have the light just a little while longer. Walk while you have the light before darkness overtakes you. Whoever walks in the dark does not know where they're going. Light shows us the way. Light gives us direction for our lives. Whoever walks in darkness doesn't even know the direction they're going in. They could be turning round and turning back on themselves. It takes light to give brightness to our path, and that light is Jesus. I think there's something life-giving, something powerful about knowing who we are and about knowing where we belong. And that's the last thing that we find in our passage today, is belonging. Probably noticed on the news and online, there's been a lot of talk over the last week or so about the importance of family, about the importance of meeting with family over the Christmas period. And I totally get what people say, because I want to meet with my family too. As a holiday, Christmas and the Christmas season is all about family. It's about being together, and it's a lovely thing to do. Although, remember, that's true for many people, but not for everyone. For some people, the Christmas family thing actually is quite difficult. The thing is though, 2020 or whatever year, the promise of Christmas is about more than a meal with a family once a year. It's about knowing who we are and where we belong. And that's why, whether our traditions are the same or different this year, we can still celebrate secure in knowing who we are and where we belong. Let's hold on to that. In all the unsettledness of this season, let's hold on to that. John tells us, to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children of God. That's our identity as his people, those who believed in his name. We have a place in God's family. That's where we belong. Now, obviously, everyone knows we're part of a family by birth. And actually, back when John was writing, one of the big things, one of the important elements of being part of the people of God was being Jewish by birth. Non-Jews could convert and would be welcomed into the community, but they weren't quite a full part of the family. There's no blood relationship there, you could say. John tells us that faith in Jesus means that we are all part of this family of God, Jew or Gentile, Chinese or white or whatever. Those who believe belong in his household and have the rights and the responsibilities of children of God. Children not born in human ways, but children born of God. It's not about human birth. It's about spiritual birth. In his first letter, John carries on the same theme. He says, "See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God." And that's what we are. The reason the world does not know us is that it did not know him. And this light coming into the world in the birth of Jesus is the light of the love of God, shining into his world and saying, here is life. Here is where you belong. Here is family. Come be welcomed into my household. You belong here. And at a time, maybe when we feel a little bit more disconnected from things than we have in the past, the light of Christmas says, you have a place. You belong. You have a place in God's family. Of course, not everyone recognised that light which created and illuminated and called people home to God. So John tells us he was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognise him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. The one who made the world was here in the world, and people couldn't or wouldn't see him. The one who created life in every possible sense of the word was here with his people, and people didn't recognise him. Now it seems to me we live at a time when there's a lot of exploring what the world's about. Physically, scientifically, psychologically, there's a lot of exploration about what the world's about. And it's interesting, and to me it's a wonderful thing to discover more and more of what the world's about. But in all that exploring, in all that discovering, the one who's the source of it all is not recognised. In fact, sometimes he's even actively dismissed. And even among his own people, John tells us he came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. The people of God, the Jewish people, they were looking for a Messiah, a Saviour. But when Jesus came, they didn't recognise him as the Saviour they were waiting for. He didn't fit the bill. No power, no influence. What kind of light could this guy possibly be? And yet here was someone shining a light into the social and religious lives of his people and turning things completely upside down. Even just in John's Gospel, we have unique stories about this radical saviour. He talks to a Samaritan woman, a woman and an enemy of the nation, his nation. He challenges those who want to stone a woman who's caught in adultery. He takes up a towel and he starts to wash the feet of his disciples like a servant or a slave. All of these stories are found only in John's Gospel. And later, as Jesus nears the end of his life, John tells us, even after Jesus had performed so many signs in their presence, they still would not believe in him. And Jesus' response is, whoever believes in me does not believe in me only, but in the one who sent me. The one who looks at me is seeing the one who sent me. I have come into this world as a light, so that no one who believes in me should stay in darkness. Jesus' own people saw what he was doing, listened to what he was saying, and they didn't receive him. In fact, they actively rejected him. And that's not just a first century thing, that's a 21st century thing too. At a time when life is dark, people are not really looking to Jesus, or not necessarily looking to Jesus for light. A lot of the stories we find in John's Gospel and the other Gospels too are about people looking for closeness with God. But what they find with Jesus is something they didn't expect, because it was unexpected and challenging and they weren't willing to receive it. I think this Christmas time, for many people, life seems dark, really dark. But there's a truth of Jesus coming into the world. In him was life. And that life was the light of all mankind. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And that is the reality of life this Christmas. Things may be different from the way they were last year. Things are different from the way they will be next year, I hope. But we celebrate the same thing. In him was life. And that life is light for us all. And even more than that, the light shines through the darkness, and the darkness has not and will not ever overcome it.